We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you is Monday, February 9th here in Seoul. I'm Isujin and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Ki-hoon.
Thanks for having me. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, and also Fabius with us.
Great to be here.
Great to have you. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So as we kick off a new work week, let's take a moment to reflect on the places we visited over the weekend. So you might have not noticed at the time, but chances are you pass by places where entry is restricted simply because of your age. From cafes and gyms to public spaces in our own neighborhoods, age-restricted venues are becoming more common and popping up in places you might not expect. So, Kyun, what kind of spaces are setting these age limits, and why is this trend gaining traction?
So the most common places would be cafes, bars, and restaurants. And the main idea behind this movement is the general society not being able to narrow the generational gap, more specifically, conflict that arises from different age groups through their different types of behaviors. It's gaining more attention because there seems to be a backlash to what some club owners did recently by restricting the entry of customers over 30. And in turn, owners of bars restricted entry of customers in their 20s. Now, it has gone beyond just bars and clubs to even cafes that post signs limiting allowed time on the tables and rules of making customers order one drink per person. However, the places I've mentioned are private businesses operated by owners that pay rent with a common goal of maximizing revenue. So I think it's really up to them to set the rules and regulations within their stores that help them achieve these specific goals beyond, I guess, discriminating age groups of the customers.
Of course.
Right, I mean, I did hear, I think that's what you were talking about earlier about, I saw a post that went viral on social media about clubs in Hongdae that restricted people that were born before the year of 1998.
That's why I don't go near Hongdae.
Oh yeah, I was.
What is Hongdae?
So what are your thoughts on this, Fabian?
I think many of us are used to the fact that a lot of places, especially these adult-oriented places, do not allow minors to enter, and this is usually for protective reasons. We can understand that clubs, in Korea even some norebangs, which are these karaoke rooms, don't really allow these minors to enter that type of nightlife style. However, it has changed a little bit because these age restrictions become a little bit more intense at times and sometimes even a little bit unexpected. In Korea, for example, we are to expect that these clubs or even hunting bars usually try to cater to a specific type of clients, and so because of that reason, they try to make sure that most of the people that are in that establishment kind of have a similar age range. So they try to set this type of limitations. But it is true that just as Ki-hoon mentioned, we are starting to seeing that in cafes and restaurants as well, which is not that conventional. And this might be because of this generational gap and this type of conversation between different generations.
Right, so age limits themselves aren't new and most people understand why they exist in places meant to protect minors or shape certain experiences. What feels different now is that these boundaries are moving into everyday spaces. So we're going to talk more about this, but first let's take a look at the screen. When you think of age restrictions, bars are usually the first places that come to mind, meant to keep minors out. But today, age limits are being applied in a very different way. In some spaces, entry is restricted not only for those under a certain age, but for those above it, and it's no longer just nightlife venues. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at where certain age groups are being barred from entering, why these age-restricted spaces are on the rise, and what young people really think about places that limit who gets to walk through the door. As we just saw in a video, age-restricted venues are becoming more common, and it's not just about keeping minors out anymore. These spaces are catering to specific customer preferences, whether it's creating a quieter environment for older adults or a lively one for younger crowds. So we are seeing more age-restricted bars popping up in Japan, especially in Tokyo. So what's behind this trend, Fabio?
Well, it is true. These age-restricted bars are becoming a hot topic in Tokyo, but it does seem that people do enjoy the idea for the most part. It seems that some places do ban the entrance of people who are over 40. But at the same time, there are other places that don't allow customers that are under 25, which is quite surprising. This is because this changes to cater specific types of clients because they do create the atmosphere of the place, and so the owners of those places do try to set that type of vibe, let's say. So these bars that are catering these younger audiences and don't allow people who are over sometimes even 25, 30, or 40 do tend to be a little bit more louder, have this kind of like liver, a little bit more of an energetic ambience, while those that cater to an older generation do tend to be a little bit more expensive to set those boundaries, and at the same time they're a little bit more quiet and peaceful. This does change a little bit the dynamic. We are used to seeing these clubs and bars cater to only young people who are also, as customers, expecting to find other young people that they can engage with in the nightlife. However, now people who are, for example, over 40 or over 30 are finding a lot of joy in being able to find their own space that is designed for people their own age. And this shouldn't really come as a surprise for a lot of foreigners that have visited Japan as tourists, because Japan also has this type of restrictions in a lot of places inside the country. So we have, for example, restaurants and bars that don't allow this type of foreigners that don't really have that fluency in Japanese. So because of that, people sometimes wonder if this is a good measure. Sometimes it is to avoid that the establishment doesn't really provide a sloppy type of service, but at the same time it can be some type of discrimination, and people sometimes might even feel offended by it.
You know, that sounds like a typical way to discriminate people, but I guess that justification also makes sense. But this shift isn't just happening in Japan, we're also seeing it happening in Korea with a similar rise in age-restricted spaces. So let's talk about the Korean version of this trend. So Kyung, what does age-restricted zones look like right here in Korea?
So the first appearance of the no zone in Korea, which was the no kid zone, first went public in the 2010s. It started to spread, and the number of restaurants and cafes that apply the no kid zone, meaning restricting entry of infants and children, are estimated to have reached around 500 stores nationwide as of today. Now, since then, no zones have expanded into various forms of age-based restrictions, such as no senior zones, no middle school student zones, and even a few years ago, I mentioned this briefly in the beginning of today's episode, there was even a no 20 zone that emerged. And the story behind this was in Hongdae, a district in Seoul famously known for many young people to hang out in clubs and bars. A bar owner reportedly thought it was very strange and discriminatory, perhaps, that people in their 30s and older were barred from entering clubs. So he created his own bar that did the quite opposite, one that prohibited customers in their 20s. And surprisingly, business went very well, and it recently opened its second branch. And customers who are 30 and over who actually go to these bars said that they were able to really communicate and like get along with all the different customers. Not that they actually talked to the other customers, but because of the music they played, like hit songs that were very popular, like when they were young, like the 20s would not really quite understand. And because they only play those kind of specific music, they were like, oh, I feel more comfortable, I feel more welcome, and I'm able to connect with everyone in this area. Whereas if they had many younger people, a lot younger people, they'll be like, what is this aje song? What is this old school? You know, these kind of songs. So I think that's one of the reasons why this bar owner opened this this no 20s restricted bar, and it's doing well. So I guess this is one clear example of these age discriminations and restrictions.
Yeah, I can definitely see why that's in demand for people who are going just to enjoy the music. And it's fascinating that what began with the No Kids Zone in 2010s has since expanded to include a wide range of age restrictions, from seniors to even people in their 20s. But Fao, this brings in more of a fundamental question. So why are age-restricted zones becoming so widespread?
Well, if we start calling these venues the no zones, I think we can distinguish, for example, 4 types and some of the reasons why they keep appearing. We have, for example, the no kids zone, and this type of zones are usually designed this way because of how, well, let's say the damage and disruption that the children can make. Most of the time, it is blamed on the parents' supervision. Then we have the no minor zone, which is usually designed to be a protective measure, but at the same time, sometimes they try to evade having a type of customer that would order a very inexpensive item from the menu and then just stay hours at the establishment. This is a similar case with the no 20 zone, which in Korea we have a term that is 가공적?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's exactly.
가공적. So this term refers to those type of youngsters that would order, for example, a very cheap type of drink and then stay at a cafe for, I don't know, maybe 6, 7, even 8 hours studying or working. And a lot of establishments are trying to put some measures to avoid this type of problem. And then we have the no senior zones. And in Korea, this has become a very hot topic because it wasn't that frequent, but there's a lot of people that argue that sometimes this older generations sometimes use informal speech with the staff, sometimes even bring their own snacks. They also sometimes order only a very small part of the menu and stay for hours, and they might not be that used or familiar with the etiquette or the style of these trendy places. And so as we can see, every single restriction zone caters to a specific type of atmosphere and tries to evade a problem that is usually assigned to a specific age group. But a lot of people argue that just because you belong to that age group doesn't really mean that you have that specific behavior as a consumer.
Right, so I really appreciate you walking us through the different types. So it's clear that age-restricted zones are designed to prevent specific customer-related issues. So this brings us to another key point. So in Korea, there is a cultural concept of the customer is always right. So I want to talk about the cultural aspect of this. So what does that mean, and how does basically culture, Korean culture, influence these age-restricted zones?
So what you just said about like the customer is always right, there is a Korean saying, 손님이 왕이다, which basically means customer is king. Now, hence, because customers have more say and somewhat, I guess, more authority over the owners, it leaves owners often helpless when issues arise within these premises. So as a result, some establishments have chosen to prevent these kinds of problems in advance by designating themselves as no zones. For example, no kids zones or no senior zones or even no, I guess, 30 zones. And this is in contrast to some Western countries where etiquette is very much emphasized and customers are expected to meet basic standards of behavior and show respect to workers first. So I guess these kind of conflicts would not, I guess, arise less in these kind of countries because they have that common behavior they need to keep in mind actually going to a restaurant.
So that contrast really helps explain why no zones have taken root here. When business owners feel they can't push back or set boundaries in the moment, drawing those lines in advance can seem like the only option, but it also raises a bigger question about whether we should be redefining what being a good customer means. So to gain a more global perspective, we're going to talk to a guest from Poland, and that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Gregory from Poland. So hello, thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, so what kinds of age restriction zones are there in Poland?
So in Poland, we usually do have age restrictions if it comes to places like bars, clubs, maybe some movies if they're rated above, for example, 16. But what we usually do not have is like cafes that don't allow kids, for example.
Okay, Gregory. Another question is, how do people generally view restricted zones, in your country?
How do they view that kind of zones in my country? Let's say I was talking recently with my brother about this topic actually, because he has two kids, so he has more to say on that subject. And I asked him if he approaches this problem in Poland that they want to go to a cafe or restaurant and they are not allowed because of the kids. And he said that it never happened. He never saw like place like this. I mean, if he went to a like fine dining restaurant, it probably would be a problem. But in general, places like this do not exist. We usually rely more on social norms. People just don't go with children that are misbehaving to a restaurant. If they know they're misbehaving, they cannot control them. They just eat at home or something like that. So the one more place that we could find a age restriction if it comes, for example, to kids is like a hotel, but usually in more touristic areas.
And how can generational conflicts that arise from these age-restricted zones be better resolved in the future?
Well, I believe that dialogue is needed. People need to speak with each other rather than just close and, you're restricted. We're not talking about it. You're not gonna enter our restaurant, our cafe. I mean, I believe that it's more of a social norm, and if people want peace, if people want to go to a cafe that's designed, for example, for reading books, then let them read the book in peace. Let them enjoy after the whole week of work. Let them enjoy the book in silence. Let's not go there and, I don't know, drink soda and laugh and disrupt their peace and just be kind to each other. But the dialogue is needed, I think.
Right. Thank you
It's
so
important.
much. I agree. Right. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today, Gregory.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we just heard from our guest from Poland about the different types of age-restricted spaces in his country and how generational conflict influences his perception. So speaking of generational differences, what's the younger generation's take on age-restricted spaces, Kim?
So to answer your question, Sujin, let's take a look at the screen for more details. Hankuk Research, a South Korean marketing and public opinion firm, asked 1,000 South Korean adults aged 18 and over on their thoughts on no kid zones. So 73% of respondents said they are for no kid zones, as it is ultimately the owner's choice and preference, and that other customers who don't bring kids to the stores should be considered as well. Whereas only 18% said they are against no kid zones, as it is discriminatory and gives negative influence on childbirth and parenting. Now, although both responses have clear explanations, it really comes down to who is in charge of these stores and what customers they are targeting in the first place. And honestly, I wouldn't want to go to a place where I don't feel welcomed, but at the same time, I wouldn't really question their intentions and create a heated argument, because I'm sure, the other end has their own understandable reasons, and there will be other places where they will be more welcoming to me as a customer.
Right. So it's interesting that the rise in discussions about problematic customers and the struggles of small business owners seems to be creating a shared understanding. However, there's a strong counterpoint to these views, with concerns that age restrictions can fuel discrimination and increase generational conflict. So how do some people think that age-restricted spaces can deepen societal divisions, Fabio?
Well, most of the problem comes from generalizing the behavior as a customer just because you belong to a specific age group. It doesn't really mean that just because you're a kid, you're going to make noise. And it doesn't really mean that just because you're part of the older generation, you're just going to, not abide by the rules of trendy places. At the same time, Korea is right now on the hot spot internationally for being a little bit on the gray zone when it comes to this kind of regulations. We also need to remember that South Korea as a country, just as Japan, is one of the only ones from the OECD that doesn't have a very clearly defined anti-discrimination law. Of course, the National Human Rights Commission Act of Korea does prevent some discrimination from happening, but when it comes to strict legislation, it is a little bit more ambiguous.
So this really brings into focus how these policies might unintentionally worsen generational tensions. So it's clear this is quite a divided issue. So we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking, what do you think about age-restricted zones such as no kids or no senior areas? So here's what the results showed. A recent poll revealed varying opinions on the matter. 47% believe it's the owner's right to reinforce such rules, while 31% of respondents see these restrictions as discrimination, and only 12% consider them absolutely necessary, and 10% remain unsure. So while a majority see it as a business owner's right, a solid amount still view it as discriminatory. So this shows that while some see these restrictions as a necessary part of business management, others feel they could deepen societal divides. So given the concerns surrounding age-restricted spaces, are there alternative solutions that could balance both individual freedom and the need for specific age-restricted environments, Kyun?
Honestly, I talked about this before. There are only around 500 stores that apply the no kids zones, and that only accounts for 0.07% of the total number of approximately 700,000 food service establishments nationwide. So I think, people who are against this can always choose different options. There are more stores that are actually welcoming different age groups or even all ages. So I think it really comes down to the individual. And honestly, in today's tough economic situation, any customer will be a gift to the owners.
That's a very good point. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I do think, honestly, living here in South Korea, I have to be very, very honest, it's not that easy to find these places unless you really encounter them, in a very natural way, I guess. Unless it's a club, I don't think this type of restrictions or limitations are that visible yet or tangible, but they are making a lot of noise. I do think that the customers do have also a saying on the type of experience that they want to have. So if they do agree that the owner can make this type of arrangements in their own business, I also think that it's fair. But I do think that we have to be a little bit careful on the way we deliver it.
Right, so age-restricted spaces reflect more than just business decisions. They reveal how different generations share or struggle to share everyday spaces. So while some see these rules as necessary for comfort and order, others worry they may deepen division and reinforce stereotypes. So moving forward, the conversation may be less about who to keep out and more about how to design spaces that reflect different lifestyles, because in the end, creating room for everyone starts with listening to one another. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But Newsgen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Kyun.
Thanks for having me.
And also Fabio.
Thank you. Thank you for having me too, yes.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have a best day. We are News
Generation.